Hi, Red Shirt here. I'd like to talk about socialism, a subject grossly misunderstood. First of all, you need to understand that socialism is just a theory. It has never really existed on this earth. The purpose of socialism will be to transition from class society to advanced communism. This was laid out in the Communist Manifesto, written in 1848 by Marx and Engels. By the way, communism means no government at all. So we're transitioning from heavy government to no government. And that's what socialism is. If you want to find out more, I recommend that you read the Communist Manifesto. It's a small pamphlet, easy reading. And at some point, I'll do a whole segment on communism and what the heck it means, okay? And class society, you need to understand what class society is because we're transitioning away from class society, which is itself transitional. Go back and check out Red Shirt number 6, previous to this. The subject is class society. You can also read The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State by Friedrich Engels, written 100 years ago and still holds water. That's that transition from primitive communism that existed for 300,000 years to class society, which has now been lasting for 10,000 years. So that's 30 to 1. So class society, in the scheme of things, is really a short time. It's a transitional period. Okay. So socialism. In socialism, the ruling class is the working class. So we have to really understand what class is. And you can go back to Red Shirt 5 when I explain why the working class is important. Class, by the way, is not income level. Class describes a relationship. That's right. A relationship, your relationship to the means of production, your relationship to the machinery that produces wealth. So, and there are two poles, you should just know right now. There are two poles in class society. There are the ruling rich, the plutocrats, in this case, the capitalist class, versus the working class. The working class produces all the wealth. Yeah, machines don't produce wealth. Workers running machines produce wealth. Because all machines are run by wealth. This one goes back to the invention of archery. So workers produce the wealth, and then the capitalist class, the ruling class, the plutocrats, the elites, the people sitting at the top, the less than 1%, it goes back 10,000 years, they take the wealth and they own the wealth. That's called capitalist property relations. So socialism wants to abolish capitalist property relations. We want to eliminate millionaires. There's no millionaires in socialism. There won't be. There won't be any poverty either. We're going to spread that wealth out and eliminate all of this life-threatening inequality that we're faced with. And that's because the working class will be the ruling class. Yes. So for the very first time in the history of government, the majority of people who are now working class in the world, the majority of people will own the wealth, okay? And we will manage the wealth. So it's not enough to just own the wealth. You have to also manage it democratically. We will have, in socialism, it will be a one world government, and that government will be small and mostly local. There won't be nation states anymore. So if you're holding on to your nation state, if that's your current religion, you're going to have to let it go, and you're going to want to let it go, because revolution, when we're talking about socialist revolution, begins in the individual. It begins in your heart. It begins in your soul. It begins in your mind. You transition from me person, like we are right now, we're all me people, to we people. That's right, community. Community becomes more important than personal aggrandizement. Okay. Small government means mostly local, like I said. small global government, small regional government, mostly local government in the neighborhoods and the workplaces. So these neighborhoods and workplaces all become democratized. Everyone has a voice and everyone has a vote on everything that affects them. So where do the resources go? Well, that's to be decided by the people who live in the neighborhood, by the people who work at that workplace. According to general trajectories, like, for example, global warming. In global warming, you have to have a global structure because we have to coordinate that. I'll do a whole program on a socialist vision of how to stop this climate degradation because it's entirely possible, but not within capitalism. Why? Because it's not profitable. Everything that I present to you in that episode will be not profitable, and capitalism runs on profit. In fact, infinite profit, infinite expansion on a finite world. It is definitely coming to the end. Now, Cuba, USSR, remember the Soviet Union, Maoist China, Vietnam, and North Korea were worker states. We call that worker states because the workers owned the means of production. However, in the USSR and Maoist China, they owned economic rights that we don't have in the United States, for example. But they didn't have civil rights, which we do have in the United States, although minimal. They didn't have civil rights, and they certainly didn't have the right to manage their production, their wealth. Now, in Cuba, and in the very beginning of the USSR, in the very beginning of the Soviet Union, it was healthy. It was very democratic, and everybody's going to meetings. And that's what it means in socialism. You have to go to meetings and get used to it, get used to being with other people and expressing opinion, expressing differences, right? You have to be able to talk about your differences and come to consensus, right? Generally, if there's a difference of opinion, you agree to test a line for a certain amount of time, the line of the majority, and see if it really works, and then go back and revisit it a year later or whenever, and talk about it again, and test and maybe the new line that needs to come out. Maybe you like what you have. So that's participatory democracy, and that is what they currently have in Cuba. Cuba is the only country in the world with actual socialism, although I would call it war socialism, because they've been at war for 60 years with the United States, and they're still class society. They have not eliminated classes because they live in a class society world, and it's a bastion. It's like an armed camp, and yet there's full participatory democracy in Cuba like you've never seen before. The Cuban people are we people. They're not me people. Now, Sweden is not a socialist country, okay? Let's get that out of the way right now. Sweden is a capitalist country. There are 116,000 millionaires in Sweden and 31 billionaires, okay? These are the ruling rich. These are the people that run the place. But you see, they have such strong unions that go back 200 years. That's why they have a lot more rights than, let's say, workers in North America, in the United States. We don't have unions. When Goins got tough, they just picked up and left, went west instead of standing and building unions. So it's the unions that bring forth this welfare state. So, it's a capitalist welfare state. Sweden and Denmark, Germany to some extent, England to some extent, France, all these countries, they're not socialist countries. They have millionaires and billionaires that make the decisions, that own the wealth, and they enjoy capitalist property relations, which we're going to abolish in socialism. That is the private accumulation of wealth. No more. We don't need it anymore. It's dragging us down. It's killing us, as a matter of fact. So we are going to eliminate all vestiges of capitalism. That's what it means to transition to socialism. We're going to have one world, one working class. Everybody's going to belong to the working class, and we're going to get rid of class society altogether, and a whole lot of other problems. When we do, that'll allow for expanded growth of the individual. We will blossom after that. So that's socialism, my friends, and thanks for listening. If you want to know more, I suggest you read The Militant, a weekly news paper published in the interest of working people. It's online, it's in print. And don't forget to subscribe. So until next time, this is Red Shirt saying, keep fighting.